Hello. Welcome back to another episode of Wholala.
Welcome back.
Hello, I'm Sam.
I'm Alasdair.
And you're back with us for another recap of an episode of Doctor Who.
Yes, this week we're looking at Series 1 of the Revival, Episode 2.
The End of the World. Yes, now it was aired on Saturday, the 2nd of April, 2005. Do you remember the day?
I remember a feeling of existential terror after it aired and like physically shaking when I walked up the stairs to bed after that. That's my only memory of this.
That was your initial feeling with this one. It's just existential dread and terror.
Yeah, complete horror. Like the first realization as a 9-year-old that one day everything would die. And I was like, oh, okay, that's a lot.
I don't know whether or not you'd faced death or learned about it as a concept in 2005, but this is the first time you fully just realised, oh, I'm not going to be here forever. One day the world will just burn. Everything will end.
The sun will expand, everything will be gone, even our graves. And I was like, that's a lot to process.
The End of the World, again written by our good friend Russell T Davies. I feel like a friend of RTD is like the new friend of Dorothy. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, a friend of Russell.
friend of
yes.
Russell. That's the one.
That's
oh my
the
god.
way.
So our dear old friend Russell wrote this episode and it was directed by Euros Lyn. Now Euros Lyn had previously directed A Mind to Kill and Casualty, and he then went on to direct shows he did the whole of Torture with the Children of Earth. He did that whole series.
Yeah.
Sherlock, Black Mirror, Daredevil, and of course Heartstopper, which I love. I petitioned to work on that show. I was really trying to get there, but alas, it wasn't to be.
And given the massive success of that, I do wonder as well, will he be back to direct some Doctor Who now that we've got Russell at the helm again?
I was wondering that actually. People talk a lot about Stephen Moffat, whether he'd come back to write the odd episode or something.
I would love a little guest appearance. You know what? Everyone's going to hate me. I would welcome a guest Chibnall appearance. I think give him a chance to redeem himself.
I think certainly for this series, let the man have a break. Let the man.
He would not.
He did a lot of good. He did a lot of good.
Yeah.
I think give him a break.
I doubt he's being invited anywhere near it.
I don't think so. Not right now.
I agree. The story is super, super strong. Mm-hmm. And the CGI...
I thought there was something else.
I was saving that, but the CGI is also there. And, I hear a lot of people say... Whoa. A lot of people say, how remarkable it is for 2005 and how much money was spent on it and, how much of a blockbuster it felt at the time and how dazzling the visuals were at the time. It's very hard to imagine from where we stand now in 2022 that this was really remarkable back then because it feels...
Yeah, I see what you mean. I think I kind of... looking at it now, there are definitely some screen grabs. I saw someone sharing these on Twitter actually recently. Specific screenshots that I think all they've done is up the contrast or something. And to my eye, 80% of it holds up now. I do get your point what you were saying about, this episode basically ate up the entire budget for the series in this one episode. I think it's something like 206 CGI visual effects shots in this compared to just over 100, which was in the movie Gladiator.
Yeah.
So it really did eat up the series budget. And I think Russell made a conscious decision to say early on in the series, I want to make as much of a spectacle as I can to really show people, wow, this is what Doctor Who is now.
Yes, and they achieved that. It does feel like we're in a real sci-fi. We're far off into the future. It still feels immersive. It's not distracting, the visuals at all. I think, the exterior shots, you get a lot of shots of kind of the Earth, obviously, the space station. All of those look really great. I think there's a few slightly ropier moments, maybe with Cassandra. Miss Cassandra, our huge... living stretch of skin, and even the robot spiders. There's some points where they
there are a couple of those.
They look a little pasted onto the scenes they're in.
I think, and this is something that I stand by this for a lot of things, not just Doctor Who. I think that often it's not necessarily the animation that's the issue; it's the composition with bringing the animated bits into the film. And so it might not be necessarily that it's animated poorly, it's that it's composited badly into the scene. And I think robot spiders are definitely a good example of that. Should we do a quick sort of recap on the episode?
Yes, please.
So this picks up basically exactly where we left off in the last episode, and I actually thought that was interesting. It's one of the only episodes to pick up literally from the frame of the last episode. I think the only other ones I can really think of is maybe the Doctor's Daughter did that.
Yeah.
Ones that aren't two-parters anyway.
And apparently there was a push from Russell to actually have these air on the same night because they kind of work back to back, almost like a two-parter.
Yeah, no, I can see it. It's more like an introduction movie, I guess, to the show.
Yeah.
The Doctor takes Rose 5 billion years in the future. I think it's 5 billion and...
5.5/Apple/ something.
Someone did do the...
Someone
23.
did the research.
5-Apple-26? 23, 26?
That was pretty close.
Someone did that. Well, someone did rewatch the episode.
I really like the idea that we can use what 3 words for our years in the future, because the name's just too big.
They just need something more specific.
That or that century is owned by Apple, one or the other.
I think it's probably the latter. Tim Cook's really pushing for that. So the Doctor takes Rose to the year 5 billion to show her the end of the world. He wants to show her something.
He wants to mess her up.
He does want to mess her up.
Poor girl is like, oh, go on then. Let's have a little.
100 years, 1,000 years. No, let me show you the end of your destruction of your planet.
He's like, I've just come from something really traumatic for me personally, and I'd like you to feel the same dread.
I don't want to be the only one in this mind space right now.
Yeah.
So, do you want to see a world die?
So after a series of fake outs, the Doctor takes her to the year 5 billion something. They go to a space station to watch the sun expand and destroy the Earth. Because apparently the National Trust has been holding it back until then, but the money's dried up.
I didn't realise the funding would last that long.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a load of aliens on the space station. It's the first time Rose gets to meet a bunch of aliens, and there is a mysterious person on board that wants to try and destroy the space station with the Doctor and Rose on it.
So the ship is sabotaged by stretchy, bitchy Trampoline, stretch of skin, Miss Lady Cassandra, who heralds herself the last human. Everyone else on board is super wealthy. She wants to make some money by killing them and investing in their competitors. And that's about it, really.
And the Doctor saves the day, ending with Lady Cassandra exploding in front of everyone.
Yes.
Yeah.
She begs to be moisturised and he declines.
He says, everyone has the time and everyone dies, much to Rose's shock, to which he then brings her back to Earth and they grieve over Chips.
In a certified savage, last of the Time Lords, fury of the Time Lords moment.
This is the first time we see the psychic paper.
This is the first time we see the psychic paper. It's the first time we see... There's another trick they add in here. This is the first time they add the psychic paper and the translation matrix in the TARDIS. So I think 2 really good concepts that help speed up the plot. Classic Who, the episodes used to have a lot more padding. Sometimes 4-parter episodes, which had a lot more time to kind of set the scene and allow the Doctor to kind of get acquainted with the locals and kind of maybe earn trust from the people he was meeting.
Yeah.
This helps bypass that because he can kind of use his psychic paper to introduce himself as someone. Here he introduced himself as a guest to the space station.
And kind of integrate himself immediately.
Yeah. And then the other really cool concept they add is the translation matrix. So this kind of fills the gap of why do aliens speak English? And the answer is they don't. You can just hear them speak English because the TARDIS gets in your head.
See, it really surprises me that these are introduced in this episode. It's something that Russell brought to the show because it, at least now for me, having grown up watching this era of Doctor Who, I find it really difficult, especially even when I watch classic episodes, to believe that these weren't concepts that were involved in the years that we had classic Who. Like, it feels like now it's obvious that that's why we all hear English and why everyone's speaking English, and I can't believe that the Doctor hadn't been using the psychic paper to get into places, because like you said, they kind of poke fun at classic Doctors because... in Time Crash, for example, when the 10th Doctor met the 5th Doctor, he'd be like, oh, I can save the universe with a kettle and a string. Like, it was a lot more hands-on and handsy, whereas now, I think having that crutch, and it could be seen as a crutch being like, oh, this is why I'm here, psychic paper, it does move the story along, it does keep the episode at the pace I think it should be. So I just think it's a really interesting and beneficial aspect to add to the show from Russell.
Yeah. Something interesting about the phone call that Rose makes back home to her mum. I had assumed, and I think you'd assumed, that stays relative to when a companion kind of leaves. It hints here that the Doctor isn't always on the mark, and it kind of almost acts as a little teaser for the Aliens of London episode where he accidentally brings Rose back a year after she left. And that you'll notice that when she rings Jackie asks her to put a quid on the lottery, which is impossible because the lottery's gone. Wilson's dead, her job's gone, it blew up.
Oh my god! I never realised that.
Yeah, so I guess she's just rung Jackie on some random Wednesday.
On some random Wednesday before, because she made a point of saying, like, are you hungover or something? But, like, oh my god, I never even thought about that.
Of course she's not hungover.
It's meant to be just after, like, her job's blown up.
It's the day after Jackie got nearly killed by Auton, so I think that's quite interesting.
Speaking of the Doctor, one thing that I think this episode shows really well is he's taken Rose, this 19-year-old girl, off to a world of adventure to show her all these things. I get the vibe that he's sort of trying to push her limits to see whether or not it's worth having her around, to see whether she'll be worthy of, like, being his companion.
Yeah, I think he's deliberately trying to push her to the extremes to see if she can hack it. You know, when she says, is it always this dangerous? And he says, yep. I think probably he thinks that's his fair warning. And after those kind of fake outs, and then he says, right, I know exactly where we're going to go. There's something actually quite sinister about that. In that exactly where he's going to take her is to kind of witness something of a kind of mirroring of what he's experienced in kind of losing his planet and seeing it destroyed. Even though hers isn't permanently gone, and from her perspective it's still there, kind of where she came from.
She can go back to it.
Yeah, and he can't. There's something in that about kind of almost, I don't know if it's wanting to see how she'll react to it, or if it's wanting to feel that there's a shared experience and an element of shared understanding.
Maybe it's a case of like, he's just gone through all the trauma, like I said, he's had to watch his world be destroyed, and he just wants to see if she can at least empathise with him, because at this point he hasn't told her. She keeps asking him throughout the episode, like, where are you from, what are you doing here? And I think this is another really great way of having Rose be the audience's perspective, because when he does take her to the end of the world, and I think there is a part of his eye saying, look at this amazing thing, you're going to get to see the end of the earth, what an amazing thing that you would never got to see otherwise. And she is just stunned in silence. She does not say anything. She just looks scared almost. And then later in the episode, when she was talking to the plumber and she realizes that she doesn't know anything about the Doctor, she's just gone with him, she doesn't know who she is, she's really like pressing him. She's like, who are you? Tell me where you are, where are you from? And then when he tells her about the translator matrix, she's like, that's inside my head, you're messing with my brain, and you didn't even think to ask for permission.
I feel like there's something genuinely interesting to be said about kind of like consent in this episode. No one else apart from Rose, I think, challenges how freaky it is that the Doctor has this machinery that kind of gets inside your mind and changes the way you experience the world. And that's never brought up again after this. But I think there's a lot about kind of, you didn't even ask. You just assumed it would be fine. And it's kind of the same with, you know, taking her to this place. He doesn't explain where she's going to be. You know, she says, what's outside those doors? He doesn't actually answer her. He just kind of says, you know, go out there and find out for yourself.
He doesn't say anything. He literally just puts up his hand.
He just puts up his hand and kind of, guides her out the door. So I think there's meant to be something that feels quite dangerous about him here. I think that really plays off. You've got this really good duality with the way that Christopher Eccleston plays this, in that in his lighter moments he's really funny, and I think he lands the comedy really well, and he's got this kind of lightness of kind of like a silly uncle is the way I think about it. But then when he goes dark, he goes dark. And
it's scary. That he can be really scary.
Yeah, he's obviously a really kind of pained, strange, lonely man. And he's quite frightening. And you're right, there are moments in the episode where you become aware of Rose's vulnerability, and you remember how young she is. And it's scary as well, because I guess as a viewer, Rose is the character you experience this world most closely with. She's the one who you relate to. She is kind of the human perspective on all this. So you're scared for her as well.
So at the end, when Jabe is with the Doctor, there's those comically big fans that he has to run through, because at this point Cassandra has already sabotaged the ship and everything's burning, and he has to go to turn a lever off at the other end of these fans to put the shields back on. So Jabe sacrifices herself to let the Doctor go through the fans, and I think at this point we do get a hint that the Doctor has otherworldly powers when he's able to sort of step through that final fan. I think that then comes up throughout the whole show at times.
There are a few, really cool alien superpowers the Doctor gets. One is that strange, something happens where he seems to almost like close his eyes and sense when he can step through this blade that you shouldn't be able to survive. Kind of calls back to episode 1 where he says, I can feel the earth turn, and has that kind of freaky speech with Rose. But there's a few other things that happen after that. The first episode he has with Martha in the hospital, he kind of absorbs all this X-ray radiation through his body and channels it out into his foot. There's an episode in the Family of Blood in the Martha series again, series 3, where
the cricket ball.
Yeah, he does this kind of trick shot with a cricket ball, which was impossible to calculate, and he does that. That's very cool. He has that weird sense of taste that gets carried through as well. So
he just can't have pears.
Can't have pears, but in the Christmas Invasion he tastes the blood and he can tell what blood type it is.
Oh yeah.
So there's little tricks like that, and I like that's how it's usually referred to, is as kind of a Time Lord trick, which I think is quite cool. The Doctor's also very good with heights, so smashing through the ceiling at the end of time.
Oh, yeah.
At the end of series 4, and also smashing through the roof of a train at the beginning of Jodie Whittaker's run in series 11.
I watched that recently, and I was like, how on earth? Because I was like, when she was falling out of the TARDIS, she was above the Earth, like out of the atmosphere, and I was like, something's going to have to stop her. And no, she just falls through a
She
train.
was definitely above clouds. I think the answer was just that she was so recently regenerated that she was essentially invincible.
Do you reckon she gave those powers to Tegan when she fell down that elevator shaft?
I think clearly so.
Tegan, time not confirmed?
Yes. Or everything that happens after that point is just a hallucination.
So the Doctor goes back to Cassandra towards the end, and I've got to say, it's so camp, her bringing in what she probably knows isn't an iPod, that huge record player earlier in it, and she's like...
She doesn't know.
You reckon? I know, yeah.
Billions
She probably doesn't know.
And what do we know about billions of years ago? Nothing. We're
iPods
guessing.
didn't exist. And she puts on Toxic by Britney Spears, and I genuinely think that was like my introduction to the song Toxic.
Yes.
I just think that's so camp.
That was the exact moment that the seed was planted in all of our minds and turned us gay.
And actually, this is just such a random fact with that vinyl. There never was a Toxic vinyl from Britney Spears. She never released it on vinyl. So the art department had to make a fake vinyl for it. So when you see the one printed saying Toxic, that was a fake vinyl. It just never existed on vinyl.
That's a good fact.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
I like that one.
Yeah. So then the Doctor reveals that Lady Cassandra is the villain of the episode. And I feel like this brings in one of the many quotable parts of this episode. There was the bit where Jackie goes, "It's Wednesday all day. What is it? You got a hangover?" And then in this bit when Cassandra just goes, "Spiders, activate."
Spiders, activate.
I don't know what it was in my like childhood brain, but I just kept saying that all the time. I would just be walking around. I'd be like, "Spiders, activate," or like Wednesday all day. You got a hangover, and I like didn't even know what a hangover was at that point.
You got a hangover. Oh my god, I might have to pick that up now. I do remember being really intrigued about the Doctor's origin, because I think when the show came back, there was a lot of question marks around what would be canon and what wouldn't from the classic series. And I know people say there is no canon in Doctor Who, but there is some to an extent.
Yeah.
And at this point, I guess it wasn't confirmed. Like, is the Doctor a Time Lord?
Not for the new Who, yeah.
The most recent movie was kind of the one of the biggest pieces of media right before this, and that kind of made him half human.
Yeah, I was wondering, not going into this, but like looking back on Classic Who, how much Russell must have thought, okay, I'm going to ignore this, and how much he's going to bring in. I think that bringing in the Time War is a really clever way of saying, I'm not going to feel like I have to stick to what's gone before, because the Doctor had been on trial with the Time Lords, he'd like worked with them, he'd done all this stuff, and it meant that he didn't have to rely on that crutch. But like you said, it also really kept new viewers intrigued as to Doctor Who. I don't know who you are, I don't know where you're from, you're living this world through Rose as well. We're sort of on the same page as her.
Yeah, but I remember really wanting to see what was on Jabe's scanner, because they obviously brought up kind of identify species, and you don't get to see what it says.
Yeah.
And she goes, "Oh, impossible."
And it's clearly so shocking to her. You're like,
Yes.
what's going on?
And I remember we had me and my sister, this uncle that is such a classic Who fan, and we'd quiz him all the time on, what does that mean? What's a Time Lord? What's Gallifrey? Is he still from there? And he's like, I don't know. But I remember finding that really, really interesting.
No, that's really true. I remember vividly throughout, throughout series 1, I would turn to my parents at different points, because both of them, to whatever extent, had watched Doctor Who. It was more so my dad, I think. And jumping ahead to the end of the series, I remember for the next time when you saw the Emperor of the Daleks in the finale, they heard his voice and both of them went, "Oh, Davros!" And I sat there as a little kid and I vividly remember going, "Davros!"
Oh my
knowing
God.
having no clue who Davros was, and I was just like, "Oh my God,
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
That they thought that's who that was.
They thought that's who it was, and they like had enough knowledge of the show before to like think that's who that
Oh,
was.
wow.
So I do remember turning to them for points of reference, being like, "Do you know who they are? Do you know who they are?"
Yeah, that's so interesting.
So the Doctor saves the day, and unfortunately to me, because I love Cassandra, Cassandra blows up like the bitchy trampoline she is. And one thing I always thought was interesting watching this episode and the next series is that when, spoiler alert for a show from 2006, when Cassandra comes back in the next series, I think she doesn't recognise the Doctor because he's regenerated, but she seems more pissed off at Rose. She's like, "Oh, Rose, you're the one that caused my death." But in this scene, Rose comes up to the Doctor and she really is the humanity, being the only true human in the room. Yeah. She says to him, like, "Don't let her die, help her."
I think she's probably very jealous of Rose. I think she looks at her and she sees kind of a full, fleshy, curvy, but very beautiful human, and probably recognises that's kind of what a human being looks like.
Yeah.
And probably feels pretty vulnerable against that.
Yeah. And one thing as well that I forgot to mention earlier is that Cassandra, at least to the audience's ears is certainly gender non-conforming, possibly trans. She mentions being a little boy on Earth, and I think that's really interesting. Or maybe just at this point in the universe, it's not meant to be that big of a point, and gender just isn't really a thing, and you can like flip between them. Like, I just think that's an interesting that Russell added, that I don't necessarily see a non-queer showrunner or writer including. I think a lot of writing of queer characters on Doctor Who has been very coded to making either their sexuality be something they mention all the time, or something they never mention at all, because why do I need to mention it? It's just my sexuality, it's not who I am. But I think having those little moments really do show that this was someone like Russell T Davies writing the show.
Interesting.
And then the Doctor takes Rose back to Earth, and what do? They grieve over chips that he can't afford because there's no money.
Oh, yeah. I think this is the nicest bit of the episode. I think like there's a lot of heart running through the whole thing. But this is, I think, definitely the highlight is when they come back to Earth. There are some really funny sound effects added in here. There's a baby crying and there's a man kind of laughing, just showing how life is continuing all around them. But the sounds are like this. It's like literally like,
and then I always remember
baby.
the one guy saying, big issue,
Oh, yeah.
and I thought he
Big
sounded
issue.
French. He was like, big issue, and I was like, are they in France?
And then the man's laugh is like, ha, 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 ha.
Well, apparently, originally it was in the script that this was meant to be right in central London. I think it was meant to be in Piccadilly Circus, and it meant for them another trip to London because they were shooting in Wales.
Right, yeah.
And the budget and the schedule meant they couldn't allow that. So Russell had to kind of adjust his script to something that wasn't in his vision. But since then, he said he prefers it the way it ended up being, where it's like
Just a normal street.
A normal street. You can't place it anywhere. They would have just shot it in Cardiff.
Yeah.
And it really leads to that point of Rose saying, like, I'm back on Earth, but not anywhere specific. I can be anywhere. I can do anything, and I can always come back home. And I think that's a really interesting, happy accident.
That's very true. I can almost definitely say which street in Cardiff it is. Every time I've been to Cardiff since, 2005, which is every time I've been
hunting.
Every time you can spot them. I mean, these filming spots really stick out if you're looking for them. And I'm pretty sure, I want to say it's like Queen Street or something like that.
Do you know I've never been to Cardiff?
That's a real shame. It's lovely. It's really, really
I've been
nice.
to Wales, I've just never been to Cardiff.
It's Doctor Who heaven. It's crazy. It's so nostalgic.
I'd always just think of that main centre where they have in Torchwood, by that huge building with the gold roof. That's what I always think of when I think of like shooting in Wales. Doctor Who.
The Bay is extremely Torchwood, but there's so many Doctor Who spots all over Cardiff.
Yeah, exactly.
And now Bristol, it feels like we're spilling out into Bristol a bit now, but
oh yeah, no, they were shooting quite a lot. Of
still not allowed to come back all the way to London yet.
Well, no, I have it. So for the filming photos I've seen from the new series of Russell T Davies 2, when they're shooting in Camden, I'm like, that's just down the road. I can go there. And in the trailer, they were in Camden. And I was
it
like,
feels very strange and wrong when they film anything in London.
But also so right.
That's so right.
Oh, and I think that basically takes us to the end of the end of the world.
Yeah, the end of the world.
Yeah. Did you enjoy this episode?
I did. I did like this episode. I think it's funny, like looking back at it when we've just had the Power of the Doctor come out, and like they are just worlds apart in terms of how they feel and the visuals now.
Yeah,
it's really jarring to go back, but it still holds up as such a classic. I adore it. They are really, really great episodes. The quality of writing really holds up, and the characters are amazing.
Exactly,
I loved it.
Would you like a couple of fun facts about the end of the world?
Go on then.
Well, one thing that I thought was interesting is they filmed this episode at the same time as filming The Unquiet Dead, the next episode. And Eve Miles, who was filming a character in that episode, who then also came back to play Gwen in Torchwood, she was the stand-in for Cassandra. So when they filmed any episodes and Cassandra would have dialogue, she would come in and read the lines for Cassandra.
Oh.
Which I thought was
my god, Eve Miles is reading for Cassandra.
Eve Miles did for Cassandra in those
That's so
scenes.
strange.
Yeah, I know, but they just filmed it at the same time, and they were like, "Well, we're already paying her to be here.
I'd love
Everyone
to
come do
see
this."
that.
I know. I scrolled the internet trying to find any kind of behind-the-scenes footage of that.
It's probably
and
locked in BBC archives somewhere.
Locked away somewhere. Like, it's no way. 2005 might as well be the year dot. Like, it's nowhere. But I thought that was just so interesting. This is also episode 2 for 2 for the Doctor pulling someone's arm off, which I feel is very, like, Star Wars. I thought almost like chopping someone's hand off. And not so much a fun fact, but one thing that I thought was interesting is when Jabe asks if Rose is a prostitute, and she's like, no, whatever I am, I'm obviously invisible. Billie Piper then went on to play prostitutes in multiple different shows. There was Secret Diary of a Cool Girl, Penny Dreadful, and I just thought that was an interesting come off. Probably not of this episode, but certainly coming round from
Another legendary series that I should not have been able to watch, but I did.
Secret Diary.
Secret Diary.
Secret Diary. I was going to say Keeping Up.
Keeping Up with Secret Diary of a Cool Girl.
Hey, well, that's basically what the show ended up being.
Keeping Up with a Cool Girl.
Keeping
It
Up with the
did
Cool
turn
Girls.
into that, yeah.
Well, thank you very much, dear listener, for listening to another episode of Wholala.
Wholala.
And going forwards, we want to hear from you. Would you like us to keep going through series 1? Would you like us to jump between New Who? Would you like us to maybe look back at some classic episodes?
I have not seen very many classics.
I have a couple that I would actually love to show you that I know you've not seen.
Get out the BritBox.
Get out the BritBox and we'll get to step in. But thanks as always for joining us, and we will see you next week.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.